Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Christina Langell. 65 million people turn the lights on every day thanks in large part to the oversight of the nation's largest power grid operator, PJM. The cost to run the grid will climb 800% as of June 1st, meaning utility bills will skyrocket by roughly 30%, according to multiple estimates. Governor Josh Shapiro said Monday that PJM is to blame. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, 65 million people across 13 states use a lot of power. Where does all that electricity come from?
Well, mostly it comes from Pennsylvania, believe it or not. There's 13 states, and PJM, the power grid, it operates as a whole. So there's power being bought and sold, transferred all over the grid, and you're talking up and down the eastern seaboard all the way out to Illinois. There are states, however, that produce a lot more power and really are the backbone of the grid, and about 25% of the power in PJM is produced in Pennsylvania. So we play a very prominent role in the power grid. As a matter of fact, the P in PJM stands for Pennsylvania. So we have a really strong connection and long history with this organization.
What limitations does PJM have in planning and managing Pennsylvania's power?
So the power grid itself, they manage it. They make sure that there's enough electricity to turn on your lights or to run your dishwasher or to power the office building that you work in and everything in between. And so they have to operate within rules that are set by the state and federal governments. They can't just decide that, for example, they're not going to just decide that homes and buildings built after 2024 have to only have electric sources of power and can't use gas hookups. There's actually policies that are debated in other parts of the country and approved in certain ones like California. So they can't make policy like that. All that they can do is take what is given to them from policymakers and then use that to dictate how they run the power grid and how they run the electricity market as a way to facilitate what our regulations require. Running the power market is a little bit different than just keeping up with the operational side of the grid. However, again, they are limited in what they can do. They can't just make things up. They can't just decide that this is how we're going to sell power or these are the prices that we're going to set. A lot of what they do is what they have to do because they've been given instructions and a lot of guardrails by state and federal governments. And you're talking about 13 different states and the District of Columbia in this. So what New Jersey wants to do is different than what Ohio wants to do. What matters in Kentucky doesn't necessarily matter to people in parts of North Carolina or Maryland. So it is a very complex web of regulations and rules that they have to follow. And so it's not as simple as some people might think when it comes to, they can just change the price of electricity. They can find a way to control it. No, not necessarily.
What role does Pennsylvania's state government play in solving the problem?
Certainly they can enact policies that, depending on how you view the electricity market and the energy industry, could either raise or lower prices. The best example of this is how do we tackle carbon emissions from power plants? That's something that's been a big topic of conversation, both nationally but in Pennsylvania, because we are such a large energy exporter. A lot of the focus lately in PJM has been on prioritizing renewable energy resources that are carbon neutral or have zero emissions in general. And because of that, fossil fuel plants, namely coal, have gone offline or shuttered because it's too expensive to operate them because of regulations. We also have natural gas plants that are, so far right now, really a lot of the backbone of our generation, because you need power plants that are reliable, that are always turned on, that are not as susceptible to wind and sunlight. And so these plants, while they're much more efficient and modernized than coal-fired plants, they too are going to be facing stronger regulations, and also it becomes more expensive for them to run in the interim. The problem is, and PJM has warned us about this, is that we can't accelerate their retirements too quickly before we have all of our renewable energy resources online. And so that's the in-between land that we are in right now. Is developers want to build solar farms and install wind turbines, and they have a lot of plans for storage, things that are considered the future that a lot of people, a lot of developers, a lot of governments want to see happen as exemplified by their regulations. But we're just moving at a pace that's too quick for really developers to catch up with because, again, tying back to states, regulatory issues extend to permits, to construction timelines. Then we also still have supply chain issues. Those high prices that we're paying at the grocery store also are affecting construction projects where the cost of a certain material may have been drastically different from when the project was initially planned. And so there's a lot of external factors that PJM itself has no control over. They have to, like I said, they have to look to elected officials to tell them this is how it has to be done in each individual state. So if a state wants to really have an impact on how quickly do projects get built, they can look at their own regulations and permitting rules. Pennsylvania is historically slow in that area, and a lot of big companies with offering a lot of high-paying jobs pass us over because they know that it would take so much longer to get their project off the ground and built and running in Pennsylvania as compared to other states. So really what Pennsylvania should do if they want to lower energy costs is to address some of these regulations that we have. And they are. Governor Shapiro has spent a lot of time talking about fast-tracking permits and making it easier for companies to get started or to expand here. So they're not completely ignoring the role that they have as elected officials, but it's a much larger role than Shapiro's complaint would suggest.
How does this all line up with national energy conversations?
That's a very interesting question because we will have a new president in just a couple of weeks, and Trump has one of his strongest campaign platforms was that he would return America to their energy dominance. He's very supportive of fracking, which in Pennsylvania is a major deal. He's had some appointees who support that ideology. And so we will be seeing, likely on the first day, a lot of executive orders, likely to undo some of the things that the current Biden administration has done to prioritize renewable energy over natural gas. But it is very likely that Trump will reverse course and go back to drilling domestically and really boosting our fossil fuel production. There's bigger things that he will have to contend with. The infrastructure law that was passed when shortly after Biden came into office, really spent a lot of money to incentivize the electrification of the nation. And so you can't just undo all of that. It's been a long chain reaction of things. And so what Trump does in that respect remains to be seen, but we do know that he has a very strong focus on boosting gas and oil production domestically.
Kristen, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.